Hi, guys. Shawn and I have some exciting news. We have created official Twitter and Instagram accounts for the Oh Mr. Sheffield podcast. It is at Oh Mr. Chef Pod on both platforms, and that is Oh Mr. Chef with 2 Fs. So Oh Mr. Chef Pod. Check it out. Follow us. It's going to have all the latest and greatest from us about this show, and we hope you like it.
Now enjoy the episode.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline. The Flushing Girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the first episode of the Nanny Cast. That's right. It's a podcast all about yours and our favorite show, The Nanny. I am Shawn DePasquale. I am here with my co-host, Toria. Please, I'm not making this up. Sheffield.
For a second, I was going to cut in because I thought you paused because you forgot my last name.
Oh, no. No. Not only did I not forget your last name, I was cognizant of your last name through every second of the pilot, The Nanny. And I was like, wow, I didn't even realize that I'm doing a Nanny cast with Mrs. Sheffield.
And you know what else is weird? What was weird for me while I was watching it, not only was my father Mr. Sheffield, he was a widower whose first wife was named Sarah. And I didn't even realize that was her name until we rewatched the podcast.
Now that we have gotten our qualifications out of the way for why we're the perfect people to be hosting this podcast.
Well, we didn't really cover your qualifications. You're just a grown man who loves the nanny.
Oh, sorry. I'm just a grown man who loves the nanny. Also, I'm Jewish, and I think that's all the qualifications that a man needs. I'm a Jewish man raised by Jewish women, and this show speaks to me on a lot of levels.
Deeply. But should we also quickly touch on how we know each other? I feel like we don't want there to be just this mystique of...
Well, we used to work together at a place called Bunny Ears. It was I don't know. How do you want to describe it, Toria?
It sounds weirder than it is, but we used to work for Macaulay Culkin, who had this creative... I'll just let that part sink in. We met because we worked for Macaulay Culkin, and he had this really fun little creative project called Bunny Ears, which was like a podcast, a website, a YouTube channel. And we, with literally like 2 other people, got to be part of that crazy circus for a couple years. And through that, Shawn, you hired me. You found me. I found you. You found me.
It's true.
And then, it was just... We've just never stopped.
No, we haven't. Tori and I had a instant rapport, and it was like, ooh, this person is great, and she gets it, and she's very funny. And I had read some of your stuff that you had written for Reductress. It was hilarious. I was like, oh, this is a great, I was tasked with like, all right, assemble a team to make a satire website. I was like, and oddly enough, Nannycast started as like a joke that we made on the Bunny Ears podcast. I forget why we needed a fake podcast, but we needed it for something.
We needed, like, the podcast used to have these bits interjected, real ads and then bits. And we thought it would be funny to do a bit that was like a real ad for our fake podcast, which was the Nanny Cast, the podcast about the nanny. And we recorded a promo. We got really into the nitty gritty of what the fake podcast would be. And then we realized it was actually our dream podcast.
Basically.
We then just talked about it for a long time about, how amazing it would be if we actually ever did that podcast. And then we found out not that long ago that the nanny was going to be streaming on HBO Max.
Yeah.
And we realized that the universe was demanding that the Nanny Cast become a reality.
Well, it was like our excuse for not doing it was always like, where are we going to find the episodes and like whatever. But then it was like the universe delivered the episodes to us in glorious high definition on a streaming site that I already use, HBO Max. And
it is actually the only streaming service that I pay for and that I don't steal.
Yeah.
So
me too. Actually.
So basically, again, the universe begging us to do this.
So without further ado, this is the Nanny Cast. We are going to watch every single episode of The Nanny, and then we're going to come here and we're going to talk about those episodes. And until we hit how many? I don't even know how many episodes.
It's 6 times 22, I guess. Don't quote me. Don't quote me. We're also we're sort of approximators by nature. So don't come here for the hard facts or the hard news. Come here for the conversation and the company.
I mean, yeah, look, this is not like the Nanny documentary, like it's the Nanny Cast. We are fans of the Nanny. We think it's a great show. There's 146 episodes of the show. Okay. So I would say that means that we'll probably do 146 episodes of this and then we'll retire unless my dream goal is that episode 147 is we get to interview Fran Drescher.
I guess let's start by saying for anybody who wandered into this podcast and doesn't know what The Nanny is and is still listening, I'm just going to put it out there. The Nanny is an American sitcom that originally aired on CBS from 1993 to 1999. It starred Fran Drescher as Fran Fine, a Jewish fashionista, say that 3 times fast. A Jewish fashionista from Flushing, Queens, who becomes the nanny of 3 children from New York British high society. That's right. And that is from Wikipedia.
That's right. See, she was working in a bridal shop in Flushing, Queens, and then her boyfriend kicks her out.
Okay.
Scene.
Okay. Wait, I'm almost like, before we say anything, I think we should discuss the theme song.
Okay. Yeah. Let's start with the theme song. It is one of my favorite theme songs of television history. I've been singing it and humming it literally all week since we started doing this. I love it. I love a theme song that tells the story of the show in the theme song. That's the thing you don't get a lot anymore.
I was gonna say same thing. It's like this throwback to like the Bewitched I Dream of Jeannie thing where you get it all out of the way in like 60 seconds. Yeah. And I was going to say the Fresh Prince also does that. That's another one.
Well, the Fresh Prince does it much like this one lyrically and also with like visual aids. But like the other two, they were just like kind of cartoons telling the story of the show. I don't think Bewitched had lyrics.
No, you're right. It was a visual storytelling.
But yeah, this much like the Fresh Prince was like, hey, look, if you missed the pilot, here's the and going into the pilot, that was actually a question I had, was like, I wonder if the pilot tells the story of the theme song. And it does. And weirdly enough, the pilot opens with the scene, the first line of the theme song, right? She's working at a bridal shop in Flushing, Queens. Then her boyfriend kicks her out in a fairly crushing scene, mostly played comedically. And then she's like, what do I do now? That's literally the teaser of the episode. And then it plays the theme song, which then proceeds to tell you everything else that's about to happen. Yeah. And then it goes into the show, like kind of taking all of the air out of the first episode of this show.
But you know what, though? I read in my research, quote unquote, that the pilot actually initially had a version of If My Friends Could See Me Now. That was like and then they changed it to the one that we now know and love as the Nanny theme song. So it's like, if my friends could see me now. That's
interesting.
I'm a really good singer, but it was from like a Sweet Chariot, I think. But so maybe if we were back in 1993, it wouldn't have spoiled it for us.
Maybe. Yeah, that's a good point. They also that whole first bridal shop scene was different in the original pilot, and they reshot that entire scene when CBS picked up the series. So there's a version of this pilot with a different scene at the beginning and a different song. And then I guess CBS picked it up and they were like, we don't get the breakup here. We don't understand what's happening. So they reshot the scene, I guess, to make it more explicit or more clear that he was breaking up with her.
Yeah, because he's like, I'm breaking up with you and you're fired. And she's like, since when? And he's like, since I started, seeing Helen or whatever her name was.
Heather Biblow, who by the way he was originally supposed to say, since I started dating Val, which I think was a funnier, when I was watching the pilot, I was like, oh, is he going to say I'm dating the other girl there? Because I forgot that character was Val.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually think that that's like funny. I think it's a funnier beat if he's like, no, I'm dating, and it's literally the person in the wedding dress. It's like a way funnier beat.
Well, anyway, go on. So she's just going to go become the nanny and bring literal joie de vivre into the lives of these children.
Which, by the way, I'm not ashamed to admit, had to Google that. Wasn't sure what the fuck that meant. Don't know French.
The kids are finally smiling. Such joie de vivre.
Yeah, no, I like, it was.
It's the fact that they fit joie de vivre into a theme song, like, so good.
So good. It's very musical theater, you know, where you get, every once in a while, musical theater will fit like very strange words. And it's usually out of a need to rhyme something, you know?
And does it rhyme with anything? The kids are finally smiling. Such joie de vivre.
Yeah, watch out, CC. It's
and then you even get CC by name in the theme song.
Yeah, it's just great. I could spend the whole podcast just talking about it.
Let's just make this the Nanny theme song cast, and I would be fine with it.
Right? Yeah.
But you know what? I think we have to move on. I think we have to.
Okay. So we sort of covered the first part of the pilot, right? Like the teaser or whatever. Okay, then she shows up to the Sheffield's door, again, as the theme song states, and she's working for, and I wrote this down and I watched it twice to make sure, but she's working for Shades of the Orient Cosmetics. Felt like I guess was supposed to be a funny joke then, but now just doesn't land and feels like, ooh, why are they saying that? And like, I'm not even sure that I get the joke. Like, I don't know what the joke's supposed to be. Is it that like Asian people don't wear makeup? I don't know. I don't know. Was it like
No. I don't know. I think while definitely problematic now, you're reading even a beat too far. I think just shades as in like shades of makeup. And then maybe it's sort of like Eastern themed somehow.
Got it. Yeah.
I'm sure like it's just a given because this is from 1993 that there's going to be things that aren't going to 100% play in 2021. It's just a fact of life.
Oh yeah. I'm just curious. I love to go back and watch things and see like, oh, what was funny to us and what did play that now you're like, oof.
Woof.
She shows up, classic case of mistaken identity, like just textbook, like the door opens, the butler sees her, she's wearing like a, fur kind of coat thingy and she looks nice and he's like, oh, you must be the nanny. And she just goes with it. Like she's just, which is great. I think one of the things that I initially loved about the show the first time I watched it was that there's like a grift happening here that's like kind of impressive, you know?
In the sense of she's from Flushing, Queens, and
in the sense that she's not a nanny at all. Like it's just a grift. Like she's just like, oh yeah, I'm a nanny, sure, whatever. Like, and I think it says a lot about the character, no? Because like not a lot of people would have the balls. Wouldn't your first response be like, oh no, I'm not the nanny. I'm here selling like.
Oh no, she is like, like to her core opportunistic, sees something, her eyes light up when she sees a chance at like living in this lush house, and she's shameless, and she is sort of like the hustler's not the right word, but used to sort of having to like nickel and dime and use her street smarts, and she is not phased at all. She's looks around this swanky place and is like, sure, I can be the nanny if you need a nanny. She's just totally confident. It's so confident. Yeah. Unshakable. Unflappable.
Yeah. Really unflappable confidence. And it's cool. Like you instantly like her as a character, especially in the face of, she like they could have taken this pilot and she like got broken up with and she's like down on her luck and whatever. But like they really, like the breakup, like really, she like doesn't blink twice. So she's just like, all right, whatever. Like, I'm out. Yeah. So, I mean,
well, I was going to say this is something I was going to talk about later, but it works well here, which is sort of the origin of how this show even got created. And I think, I never really knew like the background of this. And I maybe just assumed that Fran Drescher got cast. She got sent out by, her manager or talent agency or whatever to some casting call during pilot season. Yeah. And she just happened to play this character well. It's actually completely the opposite. Fran Drescher was the huge creative engine behind this show. And it was, she and her then husband very much modeled this character after who she really was and her actual vibe, and built all of the storytelling and the jokes and the arcs around that first. And then the even crazier story is she happened to be on a plane. She was an actress in LA, happened to be on a plane next to the president of CBS, convinced him to, she had been like on a failed pilot earlier that year. It's not like she was a complete like out of nowhere person. She convinced him to take a development meeting with her, and they were on a plane to London. He said, okay, when we're back in LA, we'll do that. She had no ideas for a pilot, but she spent a week with her English friend and her English friend's kids and kind of thought how funny this culture clash was when they went on a shopping trip, calls her husband and basically is like, it'll be like the sound of, I think the exact quote was, she pitched it as a direct quote from Wikipedia, so it's not a direct quote, but she pitched it as a spin on The Sound of Music, except in Drescher's words, instead of Julie Andrews, I come to the door. Her husband replied, that could be it. And the idea of the nanny was spawned. And that's it. And that's why it works so well, because it's so authentically her.
Yes. And look, much, I guess, in the way that her character has unflappable confidence, good on Fran Drescher, who also seems to have balls of steel and is just like, oh, I'm on a plane next to this guy. I'm going to get a meeting. Oh, I got a meeting. Now I got to come up with a show. I got to come up with a show. I'm going to just come up with the perfect concept and nail it. It's really, bravo.
It is bravo. I literally, I was just on a plane and a man was basically took off his mask to breathe on me. And I didn't even have the guts to be like, excuse me, sir, can you please no. I was just like, you know what?
I don't need the confrontation.
I can't. I don't have it in me. So, but it was awesome. It was a great story. But anyway, that whole point being, that is why it's just so authentically feels like her. It really is her. And we get that right off the bat. She has total it factor.
Oh, without question. Without question. And the show, from a writing standpoint, the pilot does a really solid job of nailing everyone. A lot of shows now, you go like Parks and Rec, I know is a great one that everyone always brings up, where they're like, yeah, that show had to find its footing. And, 2 seasons in, it started to get great. The Office is another one that by season 2 or 3, it's really great. But credit to the writing on this. Every single character in this pilot is clearly defined. They know exactly what the cadence of the show is going to be. And then, I'm going off of only my recollection because I haven't watched the rest of the episodes yet. I wanted to do it fresh as we talk about them. But I feel like that's kind of where it didn't change. They just had it from the rapport between Cece and Niles was it's just there in the pilot.
Yeah. And it's sort of it really is the ideal sitcom pilot. We know exactly what we're getting. We know exactly who everyone is, but it's not in a boring way, and it's not in a stale way. They achieved predictability and freshness in the same breath. And I was I love how I love this so much, but I genuinely was I love it. I want more. I could sit and binge this. It was delightful.
I think it's a testament to why the show was on for 6 years at a time when, networks weren't just willy-nilly trying to fill endless amounts of airtime. This was a much different landscape. Cable landscape was vastly different when the show launched. And so it, it's 1993. It's not like you had 40 billion channels to choose from. So they saw what we're seeing, I think, and just this just hits it just does it. She's faking that she's this nanny. She has a fake resume that she wrote in lipstick at the last minute, but really she's just charming, right? So she meets Mr. Sheffield, who's the head of the household. She's met the butler, Niles, who we never get a last name for. He's just always known as Niles throughout the entire show. And then she meets Maxwell Sheffield, who is like the head of the household. He is, as Toria said, he's a widower, and he's got 3 children. And so so first we kind of meet him before he meets Fran. We cut to a scene of Maxwell, of Mr. Sheffield, and his, I guess, business partner?
Business partner and sort of like lady friend, Cece.
His gal Friday.
Yeah.
Cece Babcock, which is Chastity Claire Babcock is her name. And she clearly, she just wants him. Now, the thing that I can't remember as the series unfolds is I don't know if they ever make it clear. Does she actually love him, or does she just want his money and the power that comes with it? Because she hates the kids. She makes that clear in the first pilot episode. First time you meet her, she's like, "I hate your children," and then she's like, "Oh, just kidding, I love them."
She's sort of a social climber, and there's this guy who has status, and she is that type of person that just latches on.
Yeah, and it seems like that's where the impetus for the Niles Cece relationship comes from. Is he just sees through her as someone who is just not genuine, and then he instantly takes a liking to Fran. For the exact opposite reason. He sees her as she's very honest and genuine, at least straightforward. Her
Cece,
kind of read on her sleeve. Fran.
Yeah, Cece is the stepmom from every iteration of the Parent Trap that's ever been created.
Yes, exactly.
That's her. And then Fran's is just this tornado of warmth and authenticity. Take it or leave it.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the Parent Trap because it does feel like the sort of episodic motor for this show is largely that, right? Where it's largely they were well, what if we take that moment in every romantic comedy about children of divorce or loss, and we have the dad who's got this, potential suitor to be who sucks. And then there's the one who's really right for him. And normally it would be a will they, won't they thing. And then they get together. But let's just stretch that out over the course of six seasons.
Well, and that's what I mean, where it's both well-worn territory that still felt fresh. Because like she said, it is the sound of music. We've seen this, we've seen this before. We know where it's going. And it's sort of that woman that comes into their lives and brings them to life again. And it just never gets old. And we just, I guess we as a culture, we just want to see a broken man and sad children be happy again.
Yeah. And the other thing the pilot does well is it's got good lines, right? It's got good. Now, I will admit that a lot of the best parts for me of this episode are the Jewish humor. So I don't know if those are good lines. I don't know if that holds up for everyone. But again, the show was on for 146 episodes. So I guess it translated. But when she goes into the house in the second scene and she's like, "Boy, do you have gorgeous tchotchkes?" And he's like, "What's a tchotchke?" And she's like, knickknacks. And he goes, "Yeah." She goes, like knickknacks and things. And he goes, "Oh yeah, that Rodin is just a knickknack." And it's just it's so good, but it's so dumb, And
it's the whole part of it is, it's the culture clash, which, I feel like we're seeing the obvious, but it's so fun to watch.
It's good, man. The other weird thing is, so then, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, we're also cutting ahead, but it's there's also a running child suicide gag, which I don't think you could do now, but we'll get to it.
Well, that's what I was just gonna. So okay, so we set up CC, we set up, again, I don't know why I'm going through all that. It's not like anyone listening doesn't know what the Nanny is, but whatever. Anyway, we meet CC, we meet Mr. Sheffield. Mr. Sheffield meets Fran. There's some back and forth. He's like, I don't know. My kids are really tough. And then there's the running joke about the eldest son.
The middle child, Brighton.
Yeah, Brighton keeps faking his own death and scaring the nannies. And so then, of course, he stumbles, Mr. Sheffield leaves and Fran's alone. And of course, Brighton stumbles in with a knife plunged into his chest. He's a 10-year-old boy. He's got a knife plunged into his chest. I mean, there's not blood or anything. And he falls to the floor. like he's dead. And of course she doesn't go for it, you know?
Yes, again, unflappable.
Yeah,
She asked him if he has a pen, actually.
Yeah, exactly. And then the weird thing happens. So then the other two children enter, and it's Gracie, who is the youngest, and then Maggie, who is the eldest.
Mm-hmm.
And they enter, and Mr. Sheffield says to Gracie, "How was therapy today?" And it gets a huge laugh from the audience. like there's he breaks as if he delivered a funny line, and then there's a beat, and then the audience is like, ah. And it just, that also stuck out to me as like, wait, so was the punchline just like, oh, that kid's in therapy because her mom is dead?
I mean, again, especially our culture's attitude on mental health has come so far, and even the last like 3 years that it's like, yeah, you know, it's hilarious that, you know, it's almost like the over analytical, over privileged kid that is in therapy was like a joke.
Right.
But this does set it up. It's like, okay, there's these three kids. Like the youngest one is super weird because she's clearly traumatized. The middle one's faking his own death. And the eldest, it's very clear that she's kind of like she's a total wallflower, very quiet, like instantly is like, I'm going to go up to my room and study. And, you know, Fran instantly looks at her and says something like, oh, like what a beauty. And she just sort of gives her this very specific type of maternal or
she compliments her hair, I think.
Something like that,
Yeah,
like a very specific warmth that you can tell this girl doesn't get. Usually from any
it instantly needs, you know, again, this is all framed around like their mom has died, you know, his wife has died, which makes the line, it's like, yes, the idea of like overprivileged children being in therapy for no reason is like kind of funny, I guess, but then like it's framed around like, well, but their mom just died, so like, yeah, she needed to talk to somebody, but yes, they frame Gracie. I think her first thing, she comes in and she says she had childhood regression therapy, and she's like, you know, 8 and
maybe younger.
Yeah, and Fran is like, oh, that must have been a short session, you know, or something like that. And the girl in this weird, which must have been like we want you to sound like kind of weird and depressed note, like acting note. She goes like, you have no idea how long it was. Or
like, you have no idea how complicated I am.
That's it. Yeah, how complicated I am.
Yes.
It's such a weird delivery. And I'm glad that ultimately, I feel like they moved away from that and she ends up just like mimicking Fran a lot, I feel like, in the future.
Which totally makes sense. Like if a 7 or 8 year old kid suddenly gets this like person in her life, it totally makes sense that becomes her new model.
Exactly. And so, yeah, I mean, this, you know, the pilot really just like gets Fran to the point where like Mr. Sheffield hires her and really kind of solidifies the idea, which I had forgotten, which is that like, this is all about them getting over their grief. Like they're all broken in some way, and Fran is going to come in a very Mary Poppins-esque way, and she's going to repair all of these people one at a time over. Yes,
it's very much you don't always get what you want, but you get what you need theme to the pilot. And so she gets hired, and he's preparing for this big benefit, you know, that the next evening. Yeah. And Fran explicitly told the children are not supposed to be there, but of course she doesn't take directives well. And she says, you know, we're a family. Of course the kids are going to be there. And so she gets them all gussied up for the evening, brings them out. It turns out to be like a resounding success, and the kids being there only helps. Yep. And so things seem to be going great until Mr. Sheffield sees his eldest, Maggie, kissing one of the waiters, who's played by James Marsden.
Yes.
Actually.
Yes.
And he totally freaks out and he blames Fran because Fran is the one who sort of gave her makeup and did her hair and got her this like sort of mature dress. And this is when like the real clash of the episode happens, when all of this buildup, you know, leads us to the initial tension, which is he basically says, she's not your daughter. You shouldn't have done this. And she says, well, yeah, you know, if she was my daughter, we'd be celebrating this really exciting thing that just happened to her. And he flips out and fires her. And then later that night, while he's sitting alone in his office, Niles brings him a hamburger because he's like, sir, you haven't eaten. And as he eats the hamburger, he realizes it's really delicious. And Niall says, yes, Miss Drescher, or no, Miss Fine actually took it on herself to order it for the party because she called them noshes or something like that, where it was like, she was convinced that, Cece, as a waspy, uptight woman, wasn't going to order enough food. So she had
her line is Shixas never order enough food, is what she says. And that was another one that I was like, man, I fucking love this show. Like, this is a show just for me.
Yeah. Shixas never order enough food. And so, as Mr. Sheffield is eating this sort of greasy, not classic hamburger that is just exactly what he needed, Niall says something to the effect of like, I guess that was what you needed. And Mr. Sheffield goes, I don't think you're just talking about this hamburger, are you? Yeah. And I swear to God, it might have just been my mood. I got a little teary-eyed.
No, I mean, look, it does a very good job of it doesn't hit you over the head with it. But it subtly layers in as the episode progresses the idea that these people are all traumatized. They're all dealing with some type of grief. Like they all are in a place where like they're clearly missing an important female figure in all of their lives, right? Whether it's a mother figure or a wife or, whatever it is. Cece's not cutting it, and like that's why he hasn't pulled the trigger. And that's why there's like all this weird tension and animosity. And then, it really sets it up for like, by the end, you're definitely like, oh, I want to see what happens. Like, I want to see how she keeps this going and do they end up together? You kind of instantly, they have really good chemistry, I think, immediately.
Yeah. And you really want to see these kids come out of their shells. Like, it's something that you can see week after week that just feels really good. And it's just that it's a very satisfying arc. And I was going to say that even, obviously there's some things that, like I said, might, I think by our standards, they're definitely kind of sexist or very stereotypical. And, it's like, Fran, she's always lying about her age, which actually just still made me laugh when she's like, oh, I'm 29 and still living with my parents. And Niles is like, yes, 29. Like, and she's, her whole connection with this eldest daughter is like basically through like makeup and, you want boys to like you, which obviously like now we don't want to teach our daughters that, but I'm going to be honest, I didn't give a shit. I liked it so much with the lens of 1993.
But it's also like, it's also not something to teach your daughter. And like, if this is where she's got a lot of other things that are like on track and okay, but this is an area of her life where like, maybe she needed her mom there to, he is not like, I think, and that's why I think that aspect of it holds up is because it's not saying like, this is the only way these two women can connect. It's saying that like this father in particular is incapable of ever having this connection with his daughter and needs a bridge, like he's never Max Sheffield is not that guy.
He's very English. And the weird thing is, I mean, so funnily enough, my father married my mother, who was a Jewish woman from New York, as his second wife. But it was a very similar situation with him and his first wife. They were both English, and their kids who were, basically English American hybrids. It was a very similar situation. It rang weirdly true. Like my mom is the emotional sort of tornado that entered their lives.
But ultimately, I mean, in Fran's case, she's an emotional tornado, but for positive, for positive change.
I like how you inferred correctly that it didn't go as well in real life.
I didn't want to. I just like, hey, all I know is the show. You know what I mean? I'm just here to talk about this TV show.
No, so. Long story short, getting back on track to, he fires her. He, actually long story long, I guess at this point. And Niall says this really, prescient thing about maybe it's what you needed. And Mr. Sheffield realizes he made a mistake. He ends up going to Fran's parents' home where she lives in Queens.
Yeah, he goes to Flushing.
He knocks on the door. and, under the guise of dropping something off or something like that. And then, in his very roundabout kind of British, not, sort of afraid to be vulnerable way, asked for her to come back.
Yes. He has an interaction with her mother that is also played by Renee Taylor, who's fantastic, by the way. And he has like an interaction with her that also sort of helps kind of chip away at his icy British exterior. And then he breaks down and eventually he's like, look, why don't you come do this and we'll try this out? Meaning setting up that she will now move in with them, because what he's really hiring is not a nanny. He's hiring an au pair because she's like a live-in, permanent help. So she's going to go move into their house and live with them and presumably raise his children. And, obviously there's sexual tension. They have a lot of chemistry, the two of them. She, so you immediately are set with the idea of oh, I want to see these two crazy kids get together. I want to see her fix his kids. I want to, the Niles, Cece, Fran triumvirate is great too. The way they all bounce off each other.
And I wanted to say that a lot of the writers also overlapped with the Frasier writing staff, which just gets overlooked. Frasier is remembered as such a witty show with such great lines, and The Nannies, I think, sometimes gets forgotten as a show that literally, has some of the very same minds behind it.
So I think that basically covers. There were a couple of random thoughts that I wanted to throw out. And I know that you want to do, we're going to try to end each episode with our favorite quotes from the episode.
We have a few segments that we'll end with.
From the episode,
But please share your thoughts.
So the one thing that I had forgotten that I was reminded of in this pilot is that he is a Broadway producer. Not super successful, but there's a long running gag on the show that his nemesis is Andrew Lloyd Webber. And I had forgotten that entirely until I watched the pilot. And then they're talking about Broadway and I had this rush of oh, wait, that's right. And I think Andrew Lloyd Webber shows up later, he guest stars as himself. And it's just, again, it's a very 90s, of course it's Andrew Lloyd Webber. Who else would you have, if you were going to have a musical theater, nemesis, it works so well, and I think that's great. So I'm very excited for Andrew Lloyd Webber guest.
Well, can we also just say Shawn is also a huge musical theater guy, so this show actually overlaps even more with you than I initially
the only thing the show is missing is superheroes and ska, and I would be oh well, it's the best show ever made. I don't know what you're talking about.
Why are we friends?
Because of the nanny.
That's true.
What are the segments?
Okay. So the very first thing, we kind of already covered this. We were going to just go over one Yiddish saying an episode, but we kind of already did that with
we didn't explain what it is though. So tchotchkes, she says. Tchotchkes is a Yiddish word for, it means like junk, right? Decoration,
random
little,
random little cheap junk that usually, there's usually too much of it around the house. I feel like most people know what that is, though. I think we'll get into some deeper Yiddish as we go along.
Oh yeah,
but that's an easy one. You probably already knew it, listeners.
It's the first one we lobbed you a softball.
Yeah, we don't want to alienate our anti-Semitic listeners.
Yeah, stick around. We're going to be bashing the Jews later in the episodes. For everyone.
Okay.
Just kidding, Mom. I'm Jewish and I would never do that. I love you, Mom. My mom's definitely going to listen to this podcast.
This might be the first thing that my mom actually enjoyed that we've ever done.
Exactly.
The next thing I was going to say, let's share our favorite scenes from the episode. I'll start with mine really quick. So there's a scene after Fran has gotten hired. It's the morning after she spent her first night in this New York mansion. And it's this breakfast table scene where they're all already dressed for breakfast because they're fancy high society people. And she comes down in her bathrobe. She says, well, where do I sit? And, Niles sort of pointedly goes, well, the previous nanny ate in the kitchen. And she goes, how antisocial, pulls up a chair and then just proceeds to eat with them. And there was this other line, when I think Mr. Sheffield says like, there's this fundraiser tonight, but the children won't be going. She just instantly goes, of course they will, because we're a family and we support each other. And it was just like, it was so funny and warm and just like such the energy of the show. And it like weirdly made me emotional. Maybe it's just where I am in life right now.
I get very emotional watching this show. I can't wait for future episodes. Okay. What happens when there's like actual conflict on the show? Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed that scene. It was hard to pick one specific thing because like the whole episode just kind of works. I think though it's that first I think my favorite is just when she first shows up. That whole first scene, I think it's just like joke. It's all genuinely funny. But I think my favorite line, and it's so subtle and it's a joke. Again, it feels like it's just written for like people like that were raised by my parents, But she goes, wow, this place is nicer than my Uncle Jack's condo in Boca. And then there's a beat and she goes, and he bought the bottle, which like, if I could tell you how many times growing up, my family talked about this other family in our neighborhood who bought the model home. So when she said that, I just was like, what is this show? Like,
I feel seen.
Is Fran Drescher my mom? What is happening?
I thoroughly enjoyed that line too. That was a great one. Right. Okay, the next little segment that we're going to do is Nanny Cast Trivia, where I'm going to share a bit of trivia and we'll briefly discuss, and then we'll have one more little bit after that. But okay, so this was something that I thought was very interesting given the actual plot of the pilot. Initially, when Fran Drescher and her husband pitched this to the network, there were only 2 kids. It was only the youngest boy and girl. There was no teenage girl. Maggie didn't exist. And the network actually pitched the note that we think there should be like a teen girl who Fran can more like directly mentor. And it's just, when you watch the pilot, that works. It's actually one of those times when you're like, wow, the network nailed that note. Like so much of the pilot centers around that dynamic, the conflict centers around it. And it was such a satisfying part of it that it definitely was stronger because of it.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great note. I think I can see the executive end of that note probably being motivated by like, well, we don't want the show to skew too young and we don't want it to skew too old. Like you run the risk where it's like, well, either only older people are going to watch it or it's going to be like a Full House situation where like younger people are, and their parents are watching it. But like, if you've got like a teenage character on there, then like you can get that coveted like teenage like audience to tune in maybe. And like, I don't think that that's really how it works, but like, I can see that being like the motivation for like, oh, we need this in there, Yeah.
Or even grosser. Like we want some hot teen in there.
Yeah. I mean, maybe like, yeah, but like, I do think that like, it was definitely a great idea because I think that something would have been lost on this show if she was just dealing with 2 like 11 and 9-year-olds, like 2.
Also, I think kids. you keep aging Gracie up a lot. I think this is like a 7-year-old child.
Is she? She's like 7.
I don't know. She's little.
She's very little.
Neither here nor there. You keep being like, a 12 and a 17-year-old.
I know he's 11 because I had read a bit of trivia that he is 11 years old and then they change him or he's 10 years old in the pilot and then they change him to be 12 years old after the show is picked up for some reason.
Oh, so interesting.
I don't know why. Maybe because the actor was just aging too fast at that point. They get caught up to like, this kid doesn't look.
Yeah, that kid is great, by the way. He was actually one of my favorite parts of the whole pilot. Like when he says, "Thank you, Sybil," when his little sister says he has middle child syndrome.
He reads to me like Mac and Richie Rich.
I 100% agree. I kept getting
that's what I see. I get Mac specifically, Culkin and Richie Rich, and I kept going like, oh man, Culkin could have done this.
No, I had the same thought.
Yeah.
And our last segment, which I think we're probably going to try to round out every episode with, it's just who's the Fran and who's the Cece of this episode between Shawn and myself.
I mean, I feel like this is going to be unfair to whoever every episode because Cece is always an asshole.
But okay, I thought that I was the Cece and that you were the Fran.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, how is that going to change from episode to episode? like, I don't understand.
Oh, great. This is just...
let's end every episode with you going, I think I was more like Cece. And I'll be like, yeah, dude, you're fucking mean. And like possibly... I think she's a functioning alcoholic, Cece.
Well, okay, so that's more okay. So you're the Cece in episodes that lean more into that. I'm just the Cece in terms of like who's colder, less warm, and more of a negative presence.
Yeah, that's true. You do it too. That's how also I would describe you, Toria.
But in this one, I think you wear your heart on your sleeve, and even though we're both half, we're both half Jews, right?
I mean, we're both half.
My dad you're much.
So technically, I don't know how it works. But yes, my dad was a Catholic man, Italian man who lost faith in his religion, converted to Judaism, and married my mom. And I was raised Jewish. I don't know. We never talked about Christmas or Jesus or nothing like that.
I think
Christmas tree.
You're the fuller. You're the more.
You can say I'm the Jewier one.
You're the Jewier one.
You're the Jewier one. That's fine.
Again, but it's not. It's not just about that. I think you naturally are more that vibe.
Wow.
No, it's a good thing. Fran is the hero of the episode.
Of every episode. Again, I'm not sure how this is going to play out from episode to episode because I feel like Fran is always the hero and Cece's like, is there ever a point in the show where Cece's not the heel?
That remains to be seen, right? It's probably right. It's probably going to be. We're probably going to
land on an episode that ends with like the audience being like, "Wow, Fran's a fucking asshole." Like,
and I just want to clarify. I'm not as bad as Cece. It's just that Shawn and I worked together for several years. And I would say in our working relationship, he was the Fran and I was the Cece. In real life, I think we're both wonderful.
Yeah, I think we're both a little bit Fran and we can have our Cece moments. But honestly, if I had to assign a character to you, I would have assigned Niles to you. I feel you have you've got like a witty, like a cutting wit. You're very quick. You always have like a joke. Like, so I don't know. To me, when I was watching this, I was like, I forgot we were just doing Fran or Cece. So I was like, oh, what character is Toria? And then I was like, my joke answer was going to be like, you're like the little boy who's like killing himself. But then I was like, no, she's kind of like Niles.
Well, I found out that when I was trying to imitate Fran earlier this week, I can't imitate Fran very well, but I can imitate Mr. Sheffield better.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
There you go. I go, Miss Fine.
Oh, that's great. That's perfect.
So should we leave it on a nanny laugh? Should we leave I think we're going to call you guys nanny stands, by the way.
Yeah, nanny stands. Anyone who's so mom and Toria's mom, if you're listening, you guys are our first two official nanny stands, and probably
and they're going to be like, "What's a stand?"
I know that's a whole other conversation.
So nanny stands, we will leave you with a nanny laugh, and we thank you for sticking with us.
Yeah, well, this episode won't be as long as this recording has been. I will edit it with precision, and it will be delightful. But thanks, and we're gonna watch another episode, and then talk about that one and continue doing that for 146 more times
until one of us dies. All right. 1, 2, 3.
The Flushing girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
I go, Miss Fine.